Want a bank that was ranked among the top in the nation for business banking? Whitney Bank has you covered with nearly 200 locations across the Gulf South. So stop by today. Learn more at HancockWhitney.com, member FDIC.
Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. Additional support comes from Wyndham Garden Lafayette.
From Cafe Vermilionville in Lafayette, we're out to lunch with Professor of Finance and Director of the award-winning Birkenroad Reports, Peter Raschuti. It's business, Acadiana style.
Hi, I'm Peter Raschuti. Welcome to Out to Lunch. Apparently, back in the dim, distant past, people used to get sick and go to a doctor and get cured and go home. We'd pay the doctor for his or her services, and everybody would walk away happy. That was a long time ago. Now you go to a doctor, you get a battery of tests, you get referred to another doctor who specializes in what you may or may not have wrong with you. Your insurance company refuses to cover the tests that your doctor wants. Your prescription plan doesn't cover the medications you need. Your doctor's large office staff spends weeks sorting out what your insurance company owes the doctor and what you owe. And you end up with a gigantic bill and a worse headache than whatever it is that drove you to the doctor in the first place. And everybody you know has a worse story than you about their own medical misadventures. In the face of this, there are some truly good people in the medical field who are working to deliver better outcomes for both doctors and patients, and to change the nature of the healthcare system itself. Blaine Lindsey is the executive director and Southeast Division head of a company called Aledade Louisiana. Aledade is a new type of care company called an ACO, an accountable care organization. Aledade's function is to move healthcare from a user-pays model, where you pay the doctor for treating you each time you're sick, to an outcome-based model, where the doctor gets paid for keeping you healthy and not having to visit the clinic. Blaine, welcomed Out to Lunch.
Hey, Peter, thank you.
Now, most of us have very little idea about how the business side of medical institutions work. Many doctors themselves don't understand the new complexities of the healthcare delivery system. Dr. Andy Blalock is not one of them. Andy is a nephrologist, a kidney specialist, and also the chief medical officer at Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital. Our Lady of Lourdes has been in Lafayette since 1949 and maintains a dual purpose: to provide the best in cutting-edge medical care and to provide for those who may be least able to afford it. Andy, welcomed Out to Lunch.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I want to start with you, Andy. The dual mission of Our Lady of Lourdes exemplifies the tensions in the modern healthcare market. Even those who can't afford the exorbitant, expensive tests and drugs, they may need to save their lives. It seems like you've been solving this dilemma at Our Lady of Lourdes for nearly 70 years. Do you have a formula that's worked on a small scale that could be applied to the country as a whole?
Well, I think it is part of our mission. It's part of what we've been doing for many years, and it's a focus on the patient as a whole, recognizing that there is a physical and a spiritual part to taking care of patients, and a recognition that when we keep the patient at the center of what we do and focus on providing the highest quality care that we can provide and the best patient experience, at the end, that's the outcome that patients and physicians are looking for.
Now, Andy, I guess it's got to be said that the biggest concern on the consumer side is affordability. How do we face it? You've had what was euphemistically called the Obamacare, and then you've got a new system that the House has looked at, that probably the Senate will look at something else completely different. How do you deal with the affordability issue?
Well, that really is the center of what so many patients are concerned about, and so many future patients are concerned about. We know that premiums for families now are ranging between $20,000 and $40,000 a year, with $6,000 to $13,000 deductibles. It's simply not affordable the way we've got the current system set up, and we not only have to figure out the affordability problem, not just affordable for the patients, but affordable for the system itself, we also have to figure out how to improve access for the patients that we're covering.
Well, you have an interesting position because you're the chief medical officer. Now, what does that mean? Are you more on the business side or the doctor side?
I'm kind of the liaison between both. I am a position in administration as a physician, so my job is, number one, to help physicians do what they do best, practice medicine as unencumbered as we possibly can in this modern day and age. to be their voice to administration, and in turn being the voice from administration to help them understand all the different issues, the different regulations, different rules, and try and make it as easy as possible to help them practice and take care of the patients that they bring to our hospital.
Now, I saw an interview the other day with Charlie Munger, who's Warren Buffett's partner, and he was saying we spend too much on tests at the very end of somebody's life. Is it the too much testing that's making this also difficult, or?
I think there's many different opportunities in the system. Too much test in general, I think is an opportunity. One that as we continue to increase the interoperability of the electronic medical records, as we make the computer systems that different doctors' offices use, different hospitals use, talk better to each other, I can see if your other doctors have just ordered a test I might be wanting to repeat. Also, there is a concern about the amount of care provided at the end of life, and to make sure that we're not providing care for the sake of care, but to actually improve patient experience and to make sure that we give the very best care to patients at the end of their lives.
Now, Blaine, I'll turn it over to you. You are part of the real-world attempt at a solution to the problem of the provision of health care. Your kind of company, an accountable care organization, has been created to help move the country from a user-pays model of medicine to what is called outcome-based medicine. Can you give us a Healthcare for Dummies introduction to what all that means and explain what it is that your company does?
Right. What the entire healthcare system right now is built on is a payment for volume of services, right? So when you're talking about over-testing, you're talking about over-treatment. It's not because providers are inherently looking to do that. It's because the only way you can get reimbursed is by doing those tests. So the more tests you do, the sicker the patient is, the higher reimbursement. Accountable care organizations came along first through the Obamacare law, if you will, but have now been put into the permanent side of Medicare to say,
so this part's not going to be affected even if we see a change in the legislation.
Neither of the two bills have touched this program. And the reason is because the way it's set up, it's actually working. What Aledade does is, hopefully you'll never hear of Aledade outside of this program. What we do is support independent primary care physicians, most of them focused right here in Lafayette and the surrounding areas, be able to change the model from how much healthcare can I provide to how healthy can I keep my patient, frankly? How little healthcare can I provide, at least sick care, and how much preventative care can I keep you healthy, keep you out of hospitals, keep you out of nursing homes? And then the way that the payers, it's Blue Cross too, it's not just Medicare. The way the payers have set that up, if we are successful doing that as independent primary care physicians, then that's the way forward in the healthcare system.
And the part that I really liked, and I was reading the background of the company, is your founder basically took 9 months off and walked around to see what he could observe.
Yeah. He hid out. Farzad Mostashari is the former head of the entire country medical records, so usually I get kicked out of offices when I tell people that. He went to Brookings Institution and traveled the country and talked to as many independent primary care physicians as he could, and we believe that an independent primary care physician is best suited to help us move into this value-based care world.
Do you guys enemies? I guess I should have
With
known this before
Dr.
the
Blalock?
show.
No, absolutely not. Aledade, my own health system, has a Health Leaders Network, which is an accountable care and clinical integration network, working on the same thing. And it is a recognition that regardless of what side of the political divide you may be on, what the Affordable Care Act touched off was a transition of volume to value. We can all agree that high value, high quality health care is what we need to do. And there is, as the baby boomer group continues to come through, we've got to get better and smarter at providing the health care. One of the things that the accountable care organizations work on, for example, is decreasing ER utilization. We know our ER groups are already overburdened, and if we can find ways of decreasing ER utilization when it's possible, either by getting the patient back to their primary care doctor faster or just avoiding the ER and going straight to an admission when their doctor says, look, I'm looking at them right now and they really need to come straight into the hospital, it's a decreased cost to the system. From a patient perspective, it's a much better way of interacting with the healthcare system. And from an overall healthcare delivery, the delivery of the healthcare and chronic health conditions is much better done in the primary care offices than in the emergency room.
Why is it everybody says that the ER is kind of the money-sucking part of the equation?
Well, there are many money-sucking parts of the equation.
It's the one that gets picked out, I guess.
And the ER, the reason that it ends up happening that way is they become the catch-all for everything. So we have a mandate in this country, in the emergency room, that you have to get seen when you come to the emergency room. If you come in for a hangnail or a heart attack, we're going to see you. So
I was thinking hangnail, hangover. That would be a nice
but
motto.
that's what Alade's doing. Is our primary care physicians have pledged to try to get those hangnails into the primary care office and not into the ED. Because for us, with an aging population, every person at some point is going to need a hospital. It's how can we build the relationship between the hospitals here in Lafayette and across Louisiana and our independent primary care providers to where we're talking. Where we're working together, we're reducing healthcare spend, we're getting the best patient, best care, best time.
And from a public health perspective, and our emergency room doctors and emergency room nurses will tell you, we don't want to see the hangnails in the ER. They're much better served in their primary care physicians' offices. They can get better continuity of care, better follow-up than an ER doctor that's never seen you before, shouldn't be managing your diabetes and your high blood pressure. So when we can work collaboratively with groups like this, it improves healthcare outcomes for everyone combined.
Now, Blaine, we have to tell people that you actually are an attorney.
Recovering.
Okay, all right. I was just, it's a disclaimer. We have to start with that. But what I wanted to get to your background actually was the fact that you had mentioned that I think it was your own grandfather, was ill at late part of his life, and you saw how complex that was. Is that sort of what drove you into the industry?
It really is. Watching him, get up, put on his nice clothes, go to a physician's office, sit in the waiting room for 2 hours, maybe get to see him, if not get too upset to leave and go home. And then when he went to see a specialist, there were no records. In fact, to tell you the truth, not much has changed. Last week, my grandmother got sick with pneumonia. She went to a doctor who didn't have access to her records. The doctor just gave her some antibiotics, sent her home. By 9 o'clock that night, she was on the ground. And it's because the doctor didn't have access to her history of heart failure that they weren't able to take that into consideration. And so that's what I set out to do, is to really, how can we get all this knowledge that we have in our hands together so that we can treat each other.
Is she okay, by the way?
She is home now.
Okay,
yes,
all right.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Peter Raschuti. I'm talking with Blaine Lindsey from the healthcare company Aledade Louisiana and Chief Medical Officer of our Lady of Lourdes Hospital, Andy Blalock. Andy, is there a shortage of primary care physicians in this country?
We know, based on the data, based on the baby boomer and aging population, that we do have opportunity, that we do need more primary care physicians in this country. And in addition to the number of primary care physicians we've got, and that's part of what was initially answered in the in the Affordable Care Act, we have to change how those primary care physicians get paid. Number one, the primary care physicians tend to be some of the least paid in the healthcare industry in terms of physicians.
So the specialists make more money?
They do,
okay.
and that's part of a first dollar spend mechanism that we've got. And we have to not only pay them, but pay them for collaborating with other specialists and improving the outcomes of the care for those patients.
And it's a morbid joke that I make, but honestly, it may bear out to be true. There may be as many doctors that specialize in your left ventricle in Lafayette than there are primary care physicians, and that's really been an interesting. When you look at the cost of healthcare, if there's more heart doctors, there's more heart problems that pop up.
And then, what comes back to, you're sitting in medical school, right? And you're trying to decide what to focus on, and then you're looking at things like, what do they look at? They must look at how much money you could make. Obviously, we all do that, but the fact that maybe you're not on call all the time. Things like that.
I think there's a lot of things that factor into people's individual choices of why they pick the brand of medicine they do. Some of it's interest. That was what mine was. Some of it is healthcare really has changed in the last 50 to 100 years. It used to be they had one book, and they taught you that, and you were kind of a jack of all trades. Now things are so specialized. I have multiple books on just kidney disease. So really, the amount of and volume of information that's out there is significantly different than it used to be. So the old expectation of, I've got one guy that can take care of everything from surgery to delivering a baby,
Right.
really is an older model. And so even primary care itself has become very specialized in what they do and what they offer and how they can work on collaborating care in a way that really healthcare didn't see before 20 years ago.
If I was in medical school, I would go into psychiatry because I'm afraid of blood. So that would have been my.
Don't forget radiology.
That's another spot for me. I'm 60. I don't know if it's too late to do this, but it's. What about medical records? We had some under President Obama. There was some changes there, trying to get that going. Is it a lot better than it was? Is it not complete yet?
Every day, our independent physicians fight on the front lines for interoperability. As part of the ACO program, the independent physicians have stood up and said, I will be responsible for my patient. I will be responsible for every penny of their healthcare spend. And so they are standing screaming from the mountaintops, give me data. I know what to do with it. I want it. Just give me data. And it's turned out that that's a lot harder than it says, right? You need the patient involved. You need the patient demanding their records. We've got our physicians standing on mountaintops screaming. There's no mountains in Lafayette, but you know what I mean. but it's not. It's some people don't want to share data, but most of it is that the systems do not talk. And how do you find that problem? How do you find that solution?
And when you say
We're
they
working
don't
on
talk, is that one hospital to another?
The interfaces are, if the two hospitals are on different EHR systems, they are not talking. A doctor at Lourdes cannot pull up a record from another hospital and see what was wrong with that patient.
Now, is that partially having to do with HIPAA?
Not really. It's not HIPAA. It's just there was no incentive to the makers of electronic medical records to make their systems talk. It didn't exist before. And that's, again, another improvement the Affordable Care Act brought, is they have now started to place financial incentives not only to the physicians, but to the hospitals themselves to be able to share data back and forth to each other. That's the first step. Getting then health systems to translate and transmit information across to each other is going to be the next phase of where we're going. But it is amazing how complicated that is. HIPAA doesn't really play into it, but there are so many other lines of code literally that you have to write in order to make that work. It's a national problem that we're trying to get our hands around.
Now, Andy and Lane, this is the part of the show we like to call Let Me Ask You This. Both of you hire a lot of people. I'm sure you have interview questions that you ask potential employees. I've got a list of 20 interview questions here that were dreamed up by human resource specialists, mostly in the Silicon Valley. The object of these questions is to find out something about the way a person thinks. I'm going to ask you one each. I'd like you to tell me what kind of answer you'd expect a candidate for the job to give you and how you might answer it. Blaine, I'll start with you. A number 1 through 20, and that'll pick your question.
I pick 1.
1, that's probably. What would you do if you were the only survivor of a plane crash?
I would run to find the nearest independent primary care provider.
Thanks for being on the show.
In order to see me through.
I thought the answer was food, but let's go with that. That is great. All right, Andy. Numbers 1 through 20. What do you want?
Can I take one?
No! It's like NFL draft style. He's been picked.
Give me 10.
All right. If you could trade places with any other person for a week, famous or not, living or dead, real or fictional, whom would it be?
I think if I had the opportunity to trade place with anyone, it'd be Da Vinci.
Da Vinci, all right.
Da Vinci, I think, to me, embodies the complete Renaissance man. He had a spiritual side. He had a physical side. Many people don't know he was a very gifted athlete. He had, obviously, one of the most incredible minds that the world's ever seen. And so that opportunity to peer inside behind that and see what made it work and see how differently he thought from anything that the world had ever seen before would be an incredible thing to see.
Now, how close are you coming to do modeling after him? You getting
not as close as I'd like.
Because everybody just thinks of those designs he did, but I had no idea he was an athlete. Wow. All right. I'll be thinking of much differently now.
Think of how much time he spent trying to paint the Sistine Chapel.
Oh, yeah. That's right. I've that much time painting a room. They no, because it was such a great question, Blaine. I'm going to ask you who would be your character in there?
I guess what the person that I would like to best trade places with would be someone facing an extreme public health crisis. So the Prime Minister of Japan after the nuclear disaster, and if I could take the knowledge that I've learned in my past in public health and law, how can I apply those principles to a major disaster or to our next major disaster, right?
I was going to say, living in Louisiana, you might get a shot at this.
Right, periodically we have those, right?
So to use your background for good, that is great.
Better than the Ricky Martin incident.
Oh yeah, we're not going to even
time.
go there. Yeah. No, but how do two questions I wanted to ask you. One was actually to go to Andy. Is how do you deal with the fact that you've got patients that can't pay? I mean, what is it on a business basis? What is it?
Well, that's one of the reasons I find myself so fortunate to work in a faith-based system. So one of our missions is that we don't turn people away for lack of payment. And so it's been said that the public health safety net provides care for people no matter what. And I think that we're getting better at that net. I think that we do have some mechanisms to make sure people get care. But what's very familiar and popular with everyone, certainly over the last couple of weeks, is whether or not it passes the Kimmel test. And and I think that we have to divine a system that not only will make it affordable for patients, but to give them the access that they need when they need it, not just covering a major public health crisis, certainly like Mr. Kimmel with a young child with a heart condition, but making sure that after the heart condition is taken care of, you give them the prolonged care that they'll need, and making sure that it works for the patients that need the care and for the rest of the system that's trying to do that. Some of that is working on the wellness aspect of this, because there's a lot of potential money in the system that you save by preventing people from getting to the crisis point of healthcare.
Now, you work for a not-for-profit hospital, but there are for-profit hospitals. Is it odd that you've got two different structures?
I think there's two different ways of tackling the same problem. People don't get into healthcare, I've found, because like my parents told me, you don't really get into healthcare because you want to make money. You get into healthcare because you want to help people. And they're trying to find different ways of doing that. It just means there's a different funding mechanism to do that. And so the faith-based systems, the not-for-profits have one way of doing it, and they tend to spend a lot of time and energy, like we do, with public outreach and doing things for people that might get caught in the cracks of the system. The for-profit systems find a different way of doing it, and their mission is the same, though, is to make sure that we get health care to people when they need it.
And Blaine, I'm going to ask you this. I like what you're talking about in terms of outcome-based medicine. How do the doctors get paid in that operation?
It's a new experiment in medicine. So if the ACO program is set up so if the primary care physician can keep the patient healthier and cut down on those unnecessary and duplicative services, and if the outcomes are better, there's a big quality piece to it, and if they save Medicare, if they save you and I as taxpayers,
and these are all measurable?
Dollars, all measurable.
Okay.
They save you and I taxpayer dollars, then the physician's payment changes based on how much money they saved the system. So it's working, frankly, right now, and it's really taken the focus, like Dr. Blalock said, to that preventative medicine, to that personal touch to the patient, outreaching to them. I have a quick story I really wanted to include here. To example of this is we help our physicians install chronic care managers, which means these are people who don't see the patient, but they call and they check on you. The other day, one of our independent primary care doctors, they called this patient 4 or 5 times, couldn't get a hold of him, got a hold of their kid. They got the mom on the phone. She gets on the phone, she ends up bawling. She said, "We are actually homeless right now," right? So the doctor, their care manager, found him a place to live. They pulled the money in the office and they bought him bed sheets and linens, right? I mean, this is the type of thing when you put the focus on wellness and you take the focus off of fee-for-service or how much health care you can provide, that we can start to do. And it was something that moved me immeasurably.
There's nothing more vital to all of us than our health. There's very little that's more frustrating to most of us, patients, doctors, and politicians alike, than health care. It's an ongoing dilemma that we've been trying to remedy for generations, and the struggle continues in Washington and around the country. We can't solve it all over one lunch at Lafayette, but we've made some headway in at least understanding the root causes of some of the problems, and we've been able to see some of the real-world possible solutions. Andy and Blaine, thanks for this informative and fascinating conversation, and thank you both for taking the time to join me today on Out to Lunch. Guys are great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
My guests on Out to Lunch today have been Andy Blalock, Chief Medical Officer at Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital, and Blaine Lindsey, Executive Director, Chairman, and Southeast Division Head of Aledade Louisiana, an accountable care organization. You can find out more about Our Lady of Lourdes and Aledade by following the links on our websites, krvs.org and itsacadiana.com. Today's show is recorded live over lunch at Cafe Vermilionville in Lafayette. Cafe V is open Monday through Friday for lunch and 6 nights a week for dinner, with a courtyard that sets the scene for fine Louisiana cuisine. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Our researcher is Ann Christian. Our theme song, Encore Monsieur Nice Guy, is written by Mitch Foreman and performed by Mitch Foreman and Andre Michaud. Our Acadiana business consultants are Pete Prados from Innovate Acadiana, Zach Barker from The Opportunity Machine, and Dr. Blake Escaday. If you want to know what we look like, you can find photos of this show on our website and Facebook page. These photos were taken today by Gwen Aucoin. You can get this show as a podcast. You can listen to past shows. You can keep up with us in all kinds of social media by going to our websites, itsacadiana.com and krvs.org. Support for Out to Lunch Acadiana comes from Wyndham Garden Lafayette. Located off Pinhook near Clee Saloon, Wyndham Garden Lafayette is pet-friendly with free parking and free Wi-Fi and a free shuttle within 3 miles that includes the airport and downtown restaurants. Additional support comes from ABIZ Magazine and AcadianaBusiness.com, the essential information source for business decision makers throughout the one Acadiana region. Out to Lunch is a production of I&O Broadcasting for itsacadiana.com and KRVS 88.7 FM. I'm Peter Raschuti. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to meeting you again next week around the table here at Cafe Vermilionville for more business, Acadiana style, on Out to Lunch.
Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. Additional support comes from Wyndham Garden Lafayette.
Want a bank that was ranked among the top in the nation for business banking? Whitney Bank has you covered with nearly 200 locations across the Gulf South. So stop by today. Learn more at HancockWhitney.com. Member FDIC.